I'm Georgia Williams with the Investing News Network. Today I have Kiril Mugerman with me from GeoMega. Hello, Kiril.
Hi, Georgia. How are you?
I'm good. And yourself?
Excellent. Thank
Are
you.
you enjoying the conference?
Yeah, it's been really good.
Fabulous. GeoMega is a little different than traditional rare earth companies. Could you explain to us a little bit about your company?
Yeah, so GeoMega started as a traditional exploration company looking for rare earth deposits in Canada. And over the years, and I'd say mostly starting from 2013, 2014, started looking at the main problem of that industry, which is the bottleneck of rare earth processing, rare earth refining. We started looking at innovative technologies, how to get the biggest problem of that industry, which is solvent extraction, solved by bringing a technology here into Canada and being able to process rare earths here without having to send all our concentrates to China.
Now, you mentioned leveraging technology. How is GeoMega using technology to its advantage?
Yeah, so we started developing the technology starting from very small scales, and we said, look, you need to be very careful. It's a very difficult task. I mean, refining rare earth elements, separating them is one of the most complex chemical processes in the world. And so our idea was, we'll have our own technology, and that will help us to build a mine. So the current leverage really came from when we started developing this technology. We said, look, we don't want to have a black box that nobody knows how it works. And for that, we'll need to raise hundreds of millions of dollars to build a mine. Instead, we started going towards, let's prove that it works by processing existing feeds. And the best existing feed is an industrial residue, which is coming from the main application of rare earths, which is permanent magnets. And we realized that by doing that, we could demonstrate through a full commercial plant that rare earth processing can be done here using our technology, which does not use organic solvents, done in in an economic and competitive way to that in China, and generate cash flows. And with this, then we can build our own mine. We can build a larger plant to process concentrates from other mines. So it's really then, that is our leverage. We'll have our own processing facility with the technology that works, with the cash flow coming from that facility.
How have you seen the demand change since you've been in the sector?
Yeah, so I started my career in the sector in 2011, following really rare earths, and that was a good time to see the bubble form. It was a very strong geopolitical risk globally. We saw China restricting exports to Japan, and that created an environment where pricing increased significantly. I mean, I believe we went from around $40 or $50 per kilogram of neodymium to well over $500 per kilogram, and some elements went to $1,000 plus per kilogram. And it was very difficult to end users to start to continue their development or of their products using those pricing. So we saw a lot of engineering applications, engineering developments to engineer out those rares. That started hurting some of the demand. But then when we realized that it was a bubble, well, not we, but when the market realized it was a bubble and pricing started dropping, then the traditional usages came back, and the biggest one is a magnet. And we see that magnet being applied today in everything. I mean, our power tools, if we think about 10 years ago, 2008, we were just starting to use our regular power tools, cordless, and it came at the same time as our developments to the batteries. Batteries started getting better, but as well the motor within the power tool. But the main applications that we see today that are driving the demand is actually electric vehicle and renewable energies. So the electric vehicle in 2008, we were just starting. We had a bunch of hybrids on the roads. Electric vehicles were still very rare and few. Even Tesla, that was operating several electric vehicle models at the time, were running an induction motor. They were not using permanent magnets. But now we have so many companies that are making electric vehicles, more and more hybrid vehicles. In China, just there, we have so many companies that are making electric vehicles that we don't have even access to here. So all that is demand. And then the renewable energy is a completely different sector. I mean, if we consider the wind turbines that were built 20 years ago, they barely had any rare earths and they were not very economic. They were very big, very expensive to build. Today, we build huge farms of wind power, and it's generating a lot of electricity, and suddenly it's economic. And we know that that demand is real.
Now, so do you see demand growing in Q4 in 2019?
Absolutely. I mean, the demand's been constantly growing, and we are in touch with the magnet manufacturers in China, and we see from their numbers that the demand is actually growing. It's a cyclical industry, like most industries. So there are quiet periods during the year, and they saw that this year the price remained very stable throughout the year, which is very positive because usually there is a drop during the year. And this year, if you look at NdPr pricing, it stayed very stable around the $60 per kilo. So that's a good indicator for the Chinese magnet manufacturers that the demand is growing.
Now, China produces 90% of the world's rare earths. Do you see another nation stepping up and maybe competing with China in the near future?
So China has the biggest capacity for rare earths refining, the solvent extraction capacity, and it's very hard to compete with that. I mean, we know that Linus built one facility that became, let's say, the main source outside of China. We've seen some news recently that they are having some permitting issues with the government, so we don't know exactly what will happen there. So it will be sad to see one of the only facilities that got built outside of China to, if they have issues, to continue operating there. So it's hard to say right now at the current pricing environment if any other company will be able to start building a mine and producing rare earths, because at the end of the day, if you're doing that, you have to build as well the refining capacity. Now, if you are making just a concentrate and you're shipping it to China, even though you're producing the concentrate, the rare earths are still going to China. And that's what we are trying to change. Our capacity to process rare earths is actually to try and bring the purified, refined oxide outside of China.
Earlier this year, the U.S. government announced that rare earths were going to be added to the critical materials list. Will this benefit your company?
I think it's, I mean, we've seen several governments and over the years announce and put the importance on rare earths. And absolutely, I think it just puts an extra emphasis on the potential increase in pricing that most likely we'll see over the next few years. The applications are growing. I mean, if you look at refrigeration is using more and more magnets. Everywhere where we have an electric motor, they're using more magnets. And that magnet is actually very important for us because what we are trying to do is we are not starting a mine anytime soon. Our focus is demonstrating the technology works. And as I mentioned to you earlier, we want to demonstrate that it works through an industrial residue which comes straight from the magnet. So I've got an example here for you where we literally take a magnet that's produced as a waste. Sorry, I'll take that back. It's the magnet manufacturer produces a waste when they make a magnet. And on average, we are looking at 10% waste. But it can go to much higher than that. So when you take that waste, you can process it and make rare earth oxides out of it. So here you have an example of 99.5% neodymium oxide and 99.5% dysprosium oxide that is produced from that waste. So this is a very important source of material for us. And if in the past you had to start a mine, today, to demonstrate that our technology works, you don't need to start a mine. We are starting to work on this, producing more and more. We scaled up over the last 4 years, 5 years, from our initial processing capacity, which was an extremely small separation chamber of 30 milliliters. Then we went to 50, then we went to 2,500 ml, and today we are at 20 liters, and we are targeting next year 200 liter capacity. And the idea is every year we are trying to increase the scale times 10. But at the same time, we are as well increasing the concentration that our technology works in. And this has been the incredible growth in this technology, the scale and the concentration. Both together, we were able to demonstrate and to convince ourselves that this can be economical.
Right.
And that's what we are focusing on. And here I just have a little bit of waste from the process, which is iron ore.
Okay.
Well, not iron ore, but iron oxide. And even with this, you'll produce a little bit of cobalt sulfate, because within every magnet there is a bit of cobalt, which is very important as well to the battery industry.
Are you able to use these again? Like, can you sell these to?
So there's definitely value in cobalt that you can sell. There's very little value in the iron oxide, just because iron oxide, iron is sold at $60 a ton. So you do have to produce a lot of that to get $60. So the main application of this will be just to pass it on to another company that can use it for something, but without necessarily recovering the cost. For cobalt, you can definitely get some value, but the most of the value will be sitting with neodymium and dysprosium, or with praseodymium, or with terbium. There are usually 4 elements, up to 4 elements, that go to make a magnet. So when we take the waste from the magnet, we'll have exactly those elements here after it's separated. And those elements are very important because they'll go back to the manufacturers of metal. They will go back into the magnet manufacturer.
Right. So this is essentially a green process for rare earths.
Absolutely. So we focused, some people are asking me the question, how come it took so long? Well, first of all, it's a very complex process. To separate rare earths, there aren't that many alternatives. Second of all, we wanted to make sure we are not using any organic solvents. We want to get rid of that pollutant from this process. And the third reason is we actually wanted to make sure that all the reagents that we use, we can recover. Because if you constantly have to buy more and more reagents and it's all going to the environment, even though it's aqueous chemistry, we still have to process it. And if we have to process it, it's an extra cost. Today, we demonstrated that we can recover well over 90% of those reagents. They are very important for us because if we can recover them, we can reuse them again. So it's not only about cutting the cost on disposing. It's a clean technology. And because it's clean technology, it's as well important for us to focus on the circular industry that we form within rare earths. And if you look at it, so our ISR technology is here. You do have the mining. You do have the mining aspect that will be providing concentrates, but as well we work together with the rest of the industry, which is the metal manufacturers. They make a metal that goes to the magnet manufacturer. They produce waste, we can process that waste. They produce waste, and we can process that waste. And then the magnet goes through its lifetime and gets recycled. And more we see this recycling happening. Right. And that final magnet still makes it back to us. So this is the circular industry that we are living in, and we are trying to maximize it without having to always go back to the mine.
Now, wrapping up, why should investors be excited about rare earths?
Look, electric vehicles depend on 2 things. They depend on the battery, they depend on the motor. Without a good electric motor, you won't have an electric vehicle. We went through the last 10 years of, yes, we had a price increase in rare earths, but that was not real at the time. But since then, we had a huge spike in graphite pricing, which was for the battery. We went through a spike in lithium pricing, which is for the battery. We went through a spike in cobalt pricing, which is for the battery. And I think the rare earths are coming. The U.S. government are having a trade dispute with China, which is not helping the industry, but at the same time, it is helping the industry because we think because of that criticality of rare earths, we'll see a price increase. So I think it's only a question of time before we realize that there is just not enough neodymium that we can produce from the existing mines, or to produce it, we have to mine so much other elements, which there is just not enough demand for them. And we will be seeing an increase in neodymium and dysprosium, an increase in pricing for neodymium and dysprosium. So I think that's why the investors should really start paying attention to what's next. We saw all those other elements. I think rare earths are next, and I think investors should be starting to take a position in rare earth juniors.
Thank you very much for joining us, Kiril. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Georgia.
I'm Georgia Williams with the Investing News Network, and we're here at Mines and Money, Day 2. Thank you very much.